The $2 million deal crashed onto the wooden desk so loud that everyone in the fancy car shop went quiet. But 12 hours before, nobody there would have believed the old cleaning woman they laughed at and kicked out could ruin their jobs with just one phone call. 12 hours earlier. "Hey, cleaning lady, this isn't a public bathroom." Marcus Wellington's voice boomed across Prestige Auto Gallery as Helen Brooks, 71, stepped through the glass doors in her faded work uniform. The sales manager's cruel laughter echoed through the showroom like breaking glass. "What are you doing in here? Did you get lost looking for the janitor's closet?" The entire showroom erupted in savage laughter. Staff members pointed and whispered, customers smirked behind their hands, and Helen stood frozen, clutching her notebook of careful research, while a room full of strangers destroyed her dignity in seconds. In her weathered hands, she carried a small notebook with carefully written notes and a thermos that had seen better days. "Excuse me," she said politely, her voice carrying the gentle tone of someone who had spent decades being respectful to others. "I'm interested in that silver sedan over there." The sales manager, Marcus Wellington, with his perfectly styled hair and $1,000 suit, looked up from his mahogany desk where he was reviewing commission reports. His eyes immediately took in the woman's appearance. The faded blue uniform with city maintenance embroidered on the pocket, the practical work shoes, and the calloused hands that spoke of decades of manual labor. Marcus barely suppressed a smirk as he approached. "Ma'am, I think you might be lost. The city maintenance office is about 6 blocks that way," he said, gesturing toward the door with barely concealed condescension. "These vehicles start at $75,000. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the used car lot down the street." The quiet laughter of nearby staff members cut through the showroom like a blade. A young receptionist covered her mouth, trying to hide her giggle, while 2 other salespeople exchanged knowing glances. Several customers turned to stare, their expressions ranging from curiosity to judgment. The elderly woman said nothing. She simply adjusted her grip on her notebook and quietly walked toward the exit. But as she reached the glass doors, she paused and turned back, her eyes meeting Marcus's with a dignity that made the younger man suddenly uncomfortable. "You know," she said softly, "I've been cleaning buildings for 43 years. I've mopped floors that men in expensive suits have walked on. And I've never once thought that the value of a person could be measured by the price of their shoes." She paused, then added with quiet conviction, "Tomorrow, you'll understand what I mean." The next morning, as Marcus Wellington was reviewing the day's appointments, a midnight black Rolls-Royce Phantom glided silently into the dealership's parking lot. The vehicle was immaculate, its chrome gleaming in the morning sun, and when it came to a stop, the entire showroom seemed to hold its breath. A uniformed chauffeur stepped out and opened the rear door with practiced precision. The man who emerged commanded immediate attention, not through flashy displays of wealth, but through the quiet confidence that came from someone accustomed to making decisions that affected hundreds of lives. Samuel Brooks, 52, stepped into the dealership wearing a charcoal gray suit that spoke of understated elegance rather than ostentatious display. His salt and pepper hair was neatly trimmed, and his eyes carried the sharp intelligence of someone who had built an empire from nothing. In his hand, he carried a leather portfolio that contained documents that would change everything. Marcus immediately recognized the signs of true wealth, not the flashy kind that announced itself, but the quiet kind that didn't need to. He straightened his tie and approached with his most professional smile. "Good morning, sir. Marcus Wellington, showroom manager. Welcome to Prestige Auto Gallery. How may I assist you today?" Samuel's gaze swept the showroom methodically, taking in every detail, every corner, as if he were conducting an inspection. "I'm here about yesterday's incident," he said, his voice carrying an authority that made Marcus's confident smile falter slightly. Yesterday's incident? Marcus repeated, his brow furrowing. I'm not sure I understand. Samuel stepped closer, his presence somehow making the spacious showroom feel smaller. An elderly woman came in here yesterday, wore a work uniform, carried a thermos, had a notebook with her. She was interested in purchasing a vehicle. Marcus's face went pale as the memory came flooding back. The old cleaning lady, the laughter, the dismissive comments. Oh yes, I remember now. But sir, she clearly wasn't a serious customer. I mean, she was wearing work clothes and you assumed that meant she couldn't afford to buy a car, Samuel interrupted, his voice still calm, but with an edge that made Marcus take an involuntary step back. From behind the reception desk, Sarah, the young receptionist who had laughed yesterday, was now watching with growing unease. She remembered the elderly woman's quiet dignity as she left, and something about this situation was making her stomach turn. Marcus tried to recover his composure. Sir, I was simply following protocol. We get many people who come in just to look, and we have to prioritize customers who are genuinely interested in making a purchase. Samuel opened his leather portfolio and withdrew a photograph. It showed the elderly woman from yesterday, but she wasn't in work clothes. She was in an elegant dress, standing next to a hospital wing with a bronze plaque that read, Brooks Family Pediatric Center. This is my mother, Helen Brooks, Samuel said, holding the photograph so Marcus could see it clearly. She's been a janitor at City General Hospital for 43 years. She's also the reason I'm standing here today. The showroom fell silent. Even the soft background music seemed to fade away as every employee and customer focused on the unfolding scene. Samuel continued, his voice steady but filled with emotion. When I was 7 years old, my mother worked 3 jobs to keep food on our table. Janitor at the hospital during the day, cleaning offices at night, and doing maintenance work on weekends. She never complained, never made excuses, just worked. Marcus stood frozen, his earlier confidence evaporating as he began to understand the magnitude of his mistake. My mother saved every penny she could, Samuel went on, not for herself, but for my education. She bought her clothes at thrift stores and drove a car that was older than I was, but she made sure I had everything I needed for school. When I got into MIT, she worked 4 jobs to pay for it. A customer near the luxury SUV display had stopped pretending to examine the vehicle and was now listening intently. An elderly woman wiped tears from her eyes as she recognized the universal story of parental sacrifice. Samuel's voice grew stronger. I built my first company with a loan my mother co-signed. She put her house up as collateral because she believed in me when no one else would. That company grew into Brooks Industries, which now employs over 12,000 people. Marcus felt the walls closing in around him. He had heard of Brooks Industries. Everyone in the business community had. They were one of the largest privately held companies in the state. Yesterday, Samuel continued, my mother came here to buy her first new car, ever. At 71 years old, she finally decided to treat herself to something nice. She researched for weeks, saved for months, and came here with cash in hand. The weight of Marcus's actions hit him like a physical blow. Sir, I had no idea. If I had known who she was, if you had known who she was, Samuel's voice cut through the air like a whip. So you only treat people with respect if you know they're important? What about treating people with respect because they're human beings? From the corner of the showroom, David, a newer salesperson who had only been working there for 2 months, stepped forward. His face was flushed with embarrassment and anger. Not at Samuel, but at what he had witnessed. Mr. Wellington, David said, his voice shaking slightly. I was here yesterday. I saw what happened. Mrs. Brooks was nothing but polite. She had her research done, knew exactly what she wanted, and was treated like she didn't belong here. Marcus spun around to face David, his face reddening. David, this is not your place to— No, Samuel interrupted. Let him speak. What did you see? David took a deep breath. I saw Mr. Wellington laugh at her. I heard him tell the other staff that some people need to know their place. I watched him direct your mother to the used car lot across the street like he was doing her a favor. The air in the showroom grew thick with tension. Several customers had stopped their browsing entirely and were now witnessing what was clearly becoming a reckoning. Samuel walked to the window and looked out at the street where his mother had walked away yesterday, shoulders straight despite the humiliation. Do you know what my mother said when she came home yesterday? She didn't complain about being treated poorly. She didn't even mention the laughing or the condescending looks. She just said, maybe I should save a little more money and try again next month. The silence in the room was deafening. Samuel turned back to face Marcus. But I convinced her to tell me what really happened. And that's when I learned that my mother, the woman who sacrificed everything for me, who taught me the value of hard work and dignity, had been treated like a second-class citizen by someone who wouldn't exist in this business without customers like her. Marcus's hands were shaking now. He had built his career on reading people, on knowing how to handle difficult situations, but this was beyond anything he had experienced. Mr. Brooks, I sincerely apologize. If I could take back what happened— You can't, Samuel said simply, but you can learn from it. At that moment, the showroom's owner, Robert Caldwell, emerged from his office. He had been listening from behind his partially open door, and his face was grave. He had built Prestige Auto Gallery from nothing, and he knew that reputation was everything in this business. Mr. Brooks, Robert said, approaching with obvious concern, I am deeply sorry for what happened to your mother. This is not how we do business, and it's not how I want my establishment to be known. Samuel studied the older man. And you are? Robert Caldwell. I own this dealership. Robert's voice was steady but remorseful. I've heard everything, and I want to make this right. Samuel nodded slowly. Making it right isn't about compensation, Mr. Caldwell. It's about understanding why this happened and ensuring it never happens again. From behind the service counter, Maria, the shop supervisor who had worked there for 15 years, spoke up. Mr. Caldwell, this isn't the first time something like this has happened. I've seen customers treated differently based on how they look, how they dress, what kind of car they drive herein. All eyes turned to Maria, a woman in her 50s who had always been known for her no-nonsense approach to work. Last month, Maria continued, a young woman came in wearing scrubs from the hospital. She was a nurse, worked double shifts, saved for 2 years to buy a car. Marcus here told her she'd be better off financing a used car because people in her situation don't usually qualify for our premium vehicles. Marcus felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. Maria, that's not— It is exactly what happened, Maria interrupted. And before that, it was an elderly Hispanic man who spoke with an accent. Before that, it was a young black man who came in wearing jeans and a t-shirt on his day off from his job as a software engineer. The pattern was becoming clear, and Samuel could see the recognition dawning on Robert Caldwell's face. Samuel walked over to the silver sedan his mother had inquired about the day before. He ran his hand along its sleek surface, then turned back to the assembled group. My mother didn't just come here to buy a car, Samuel said. She came here because she believed in the American dream, the idea that if you work hard, if you save your money, if you treat people with respect, you'll be treated with respect in return. He paused, letting his words sink in. Yesterday, you didn't just reject a customer. You rejected everything my mother has worked for her entire life. You told her that her decades of honest work, her sacrifices, her dignity, none of it mattered because she wasn't wearing the right clothes. Marcus felt his career crumbling around him. This wasn't just about losing a sale. This was about losing his job, his reputation, possibly his future in the industry. "Mr. Brooks," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper, "please tell me how I can make amends." Samuel looked at him for a long moment, then at Robert Caldwell, then at the staff and customers who were still watching in stunned silence. "You want to make amends?" Samuel asked. "Then listen carefully, because I'm only going to say this once." The room held its breath. Samuel opened his portfolio again and withdrew a document. "This is a contract to purchase 12 vehicles for Brooks Industries' executive fleet. The total value is approximately $2 million. Marcus's eyes widened. $2 million would be the largest single sale in the dealership's history. "I was planning to place this order here," Samuel continued, "because I believe in supporting local businesses. But after yesterday, I'm not sure this establishment shares the values I want to associate with my company." Robert Caldwell stepped forward. "Mr. Brooks, please, give us a chance to show you that we can do better." Samuel studied him carefully. Doing better starts with understanding why this happened in the first place. It's not enough to apologize after the fact. You need to examine the culture you've created here. He turned to Marcus. "You've been in sales for how long?" 12 years. Marcus replied weakly. "And in those 12 years, how many customers have you dismissed because they didn't look the part? How many potential sales have you lost because you made assumptions about people's ability to pay?" Marcus couldn't answer. The truth was too painful to admit. Samuel walked to the center of the showroom, commanding everyone's attention. "I built my company on a simple principle: treat every person with dignity and respect, regardless of their background, their appearance, or their circumstances. It's not just good business, it's basic human decency." He paused, looking around the room at the faces watching him. "My mother is 71 years old. She spent her entire life serving others, cleaning up after them, making sure their workplaces are safe and clean. She's never asked for recognition, never demanded special treatment. All she wanted was to be treated like any other customer walking through those doors." A young customer, a college student who had been looking at economy cars, spoke up. "Sir, I've been coming here for weeks, and I've never been treated with respect either. They always assume I can't afford anything." An older woman nodded in agreement. "Same here. I'm a retired teacher, and because I don't dress fancy, they act like I'm wasting their time." Samuel could see that this was bigger than just his mother's experience. This was about a systematic problem in how the dealership operated. "Mr. Caldwell," Samuel said, turning to the owner, "you have a choice to make. You can continue operating the way you have been, serving only customers who meet your superficial standards of worthiness. Or you can create a business that truly serves the community." Robert Caldwell was quiet for a moment, processing everything he had heard. Finally, he spoke. "What would you recommend?" Samuel smiled for the first time since entering the dealership. "I recommend you start by bringing my mother back in here and giving her the respect she deserved from the beginning. Let her choose any car she wants and treat her like the valued customer she should have been yesterday." He paused, then continued. "And then I recommend you implement some changes to ensure this never happens again." "What kind of changes?" Robert asked. Samuel pulled out his phone and showed them a photo. It was Helen Brooks, Samuel's mother, but not in her work clothes. She was wearing an elegant evening gown, standing next to Samuel at a charity gala, both of them smiling as they presented a check for $500,000 to a children's hospital. "This is my mother at our company's annual charity gala," Samuel explained. "She's on the board of 3 nonprofits, has donated over $1 million to various causes, and has never once asked for recognition or special treatment." The room was silent as people processed this information. "The point," Samuel continued, "is that you never know who you're talking to. That janitor might be someone's hero. That nurse might save lives every day. That young person in jeans might be the next entrepreneur to change the world." He put his phone away and looked directly at Marcus. "My mother came here yesterday not because she needed a car, but because she wanted to celebrate. She wanted to mark the moment when her son's company went public, making her financially secure for the rest of her life." Marcus felt sick. He had ruined what should have been a celebration for the elderly woman. Samuel continued. "She wanted to buy a car from a local business to support the community where she's lived and worked for decades. Instead, she was humiliated and dismissed." David, the young salesperson who had spoken up earlier, stepped forward again. "Mr. Brooks, if you're willing to give us another chance, I'd like to personally handle your mother's purchase. I promise she'll be treated with the respect she deserves." Samuel looked at David appraisingly. "What's your name?" "David Martinez." "Sir, I've only been here 2 months, but I grew up watching my own mother work multiple jobs to support our family. I know what it's like when hard work isn't appreciated." Samuel nodded. "David, I think my mother would like you." He turned back to Robert Caldwell. "Here's what I propose. David handles my mother's car purchase. Marcus here spends a week working with my mother at the hospital, learning what real service looks like." Marcus's face went white. "Working at the hospital?" "Volunteering," Samuel clarified. "Cleaning, maintenance, whatever needs to be done. Maybe spending time with people who dedicate their lives to serving others will give you some perspective." Robert Caldwell was nodding. "That's actually a brilliant idea. Marcus, consider it part of your professional development." Samuel walked to the window again, looking out at the busy street. "You know, my mother could have bought a car anywhere. She could have gone to the Mercedes dealership, the BMW dealership, anywhere. But she chose to come here because she believed in supporting local business." He turned back to face the room. "The question is, do you deserve that kind of loyalty?" The weight of his words settled over everyone in the showroom. This wasn't just about one woman's hurt feelings. It was about the values that drove their business, the culture they had created, and the community they claimed to serve. Samuel checked his watch. "I need to make a decision about that fleet purchase. David, if you're willing to work with my mother, I'd like you to also handle the corporate account." David's eyes widened. "Sir, I'm not sure I have the experience for such a large—" "You have something more important than experience," Samuel interrupted. "You have integrity. The experience will come." Marcus watched as his biggest potential commission slipped away, but for the first time, he understood that he had brought this on himself. This wasn't bad luck or unfair treatment. This was the consequence of his own actions and attitudes. Robert Caldwell stepped forward. "Mr. Brooks, I want to implement the changes you're suggesting, not just because of the business implications, but because it's the right thing to do." Samuel nodded approvingly. "Good, but remember, changing policies is easy. Changing culture takes time and commitment." He looked around the room one more time, his gaze landing on each person present. "My mother taught me that how you treat people when you think they don't matter is the true measure of your character. Yesterday, this dealership failed that test." He paused, then added, "Tomorrow, you have a chance to do better." With that, Samuel Brooks walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the silent showroom. As he reached the door, he turned back one final time. "David, expect a call from my mother this afternoon. And Mr. Caldwell, I'll be checking in to see how those changes are progressing." The door closed behind him with a soft chime, leaving behind a room full of people who would never look at customer service or human dignity the same way again. Marcus stood in the middle of the showroom, surrounded by luxury cars he had used as symbols of status and exclusivity. Realizing for the first time that true wealth wasn't measured in the price of the car you drove, but in the respect you showed to every person you met. The lesson was clear. Everyone deserves dignity, regardless of their appearance, their job, or their circumstances. And sometimes, the person you underestimate might just be the one who changes your life forever. As the morning sun streamed through the showroom windows, Helen Brooks was at City General Hospital, quietly going about her work, unaware that her son was fighting for her dignity across town. But she would know soon enough that some battles are worth fighting, and some lessons are worth learning, no matter how painful they might be. 3 hours later, as the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the dealership windows, Helen Brooks walked back through those same glass doors. But this time, she wasn't alone. David Martinez stood beside her, not as a salesperson trying to make a quota, but as a young man who understood what it meant to watch your mother sacrifice everything for your future. Helen wore the same work uniform, carried the same thermos, held the same worn notebook. Nothing about her appearance had changed, but everything about how she was received was different. "Mrs. Brooks," David said softly, "would you like to look at that silver sedan again?" Helen's eyes, still carrying the dignity that had never left them despite yesterday's humiliation, met his. "I'd like that very much." Marcus Wellington stood in the corner of the showroom, no longer the confident sales manager who had dismissed her 24 hours earlier. He watched as David patiently explained every feature of the car, answered every question Helen had written in her notebook, and treated her exactly as he would treat any valued customer. There was no fanfare, no dramatic apology scene, just a quiet correction of what should have been right from the beginning. When Helen signed the paperwork for her first new car, her handwriting was steady despite her 71 years. As she wrote her name, she paused and looked up at David. "Young man," she said, "do you know why I came back?" David shook his head respectfully. "Not because my son is successful, not because he threatened anyone. I came back because you spoke up yesterday when you didn't have to. That took courage." David felt his throat tighten. "Mrs. Brooks, I should have done more. I should have—" "You did exactly what you were supposed to do," Helen interrupted gently. "You remembered that we're all human beings first." 2 weeks later, Marcus Wellington arrived at City General Hospital at 5:30 a.m., wearing not his usual expensive suit, but simple work clothes and sturdy shoes. He carried a lunch his wife had packed, uncertain and nervous about what lay ahead. Helen Brooks met him in the hospital lobby, her gray hair pulled back neatly, her uniform pressed and clean, despite the early hour. "Marcus," she said simply, "thank you for coming." For the next week, Marcus mopped floors alongside Helen. He cleaned bathrooms used by families waiting for news about their loved ones. He emptied trash cans filled with tissues from people who had cried over diagnoses and prognoses. He witnessed Helen stopping to comfort a young mother whose child was in surgery, saw her share her lunch with a homeless man who had come in from the cold. On the third day, as they worked together cleaning the pediatric wing, Marcus finally spoke. "Mrs. Brooks, I need to ask you something." Helen continued her methodical cleaning, but nodded for him to continue. "How do you do this every day? How do you care for people who don't even see you?" Helen paused, wringing out her mop. "Because they do see me, Marcus. Maybe not at first, but they do. The little girl in room 304 waves at me every morning. The night shift nurses know I'll have coffee ready when they need it. The doctors trust that when they come in, their workspace will be clean and safe." She looked at him directly. "I'm not invisible. I just wasn't wearing the right clothes for your showroom." Marcus felt something crack open inside his chest. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for how I treated you." "I know you are," Helen said quietly. "That's why you're here." By the end of his week at the hospital, Marcus had a different understanding of service. He had seen Helen arrive early to make sure the coffee was fresh, stay late to comfort a grieving family, and never once complain about her aching feet or tired back. On his last day, A young doctor approached them. "Mrs. Brooks, the Morrison family wanted me to thank you again. You sitting with their daughter during her chemotherapy treatments meant everything to them." After the doctor left, Marcus turned to Helen. "Do they know about your son? About your family's success?" Helen smiled. "Some do, some don't. It doesn't matter. I don't do this work because I have to anymore. I do it because it's who I am." 3 months later, Prestige Auto Gallery looked the same from the outside, but everything inside had changed. The staff underwent monthly training on unconscious bias. They instituted a policy that every customer would be greeted within 30 seconds of entering, regardless of appearance. Most importantly, they hired Maria Gonzalez, a former social worker, as their customer experience coordinator. David Martinez, now the top salesperson, kept a photo on his desk. It showed him with Helen Brooks on the day she picked up her car, both of them smiling genuinely. Below it was a small plaque, "Dignity first, sales second." Marcus returned to work, a different man. He still wore nice suits, still cared about sales numbers, but he spent his lunch breaks volunteering at a homeless shelter. He never spoke about his transformation publicly, but his colleagues noticed. He listened more, assumed less, and treated every customer with the respect he had learned to give the families at City General Hospital. 6 months after the incident, Samuel Brooks received a handwritten letter. It was from Marcus Wellington. "Dear Mr. Brooks, I want you to know that your mother changed my life. Not through anger or punishment, but through grace. She taught me what real service looks like, not serving customers, but serving humanity. I've enrolled in evening classes to become a hospital chaplain. I want to spend the rest of my career helping people in their most vulnerable moments, the way your mother has done for 43 years. Please tell her that room 237 at City General now has a small plaque by the door. The Helen Brooks Family Room, a place of comfort and dignity. The hospital board approved it unanimously. Your mother's legacy isn't the money your family donated. It's the reminder that every person deserves to be seen, respected, and valued. With deep gratitude, Marcus Wellington." On Helen's 72nd birthday, she received dozens of cards. Some were from her son's corporate colleagues, some from the families she had comforted at the hospital. But the one that made her smile was from a young college student. "Dear Mrs. Brooks, you don't know me, but I was in the dealership that day. I saw how you were treated, and I saw how you handled it with such dignity. I've been thinking about it ever since. I'm studying to be a teacher, and I promise that I will never let anyone in my classroom feel invisible or unworthy. You taught me that respect isn't something you earn, it's something you deserve just for being human. Thank you for showing me who I want to be." Sarah Chen, a year later. Helen Brooks still worked at City General Hospital, not because she needed the money, but because she needed the purpose. She had turned down her son's offers to retire, to travel, to live a life of leisure. "This is my life," she told Samuel during one of their weekly lunches. "This is where I belong." Samuel, now understanding his mother better than ever, simply nodded. "I know, Mom. I'm proud of you." "And I'm proud of you," Helen replied. "Not because of your success, but because you stood up for what was right when it mattered." The silver sedan Helen had chosen sat in her driveway, polished and cared for. She drove it to work every day, the same woman in the same uniform, but now in a car that represented something more than transportation. It represented the moment when dignity triumphed over prejudice, when character proved more valuable than appearance, when one person's courage to demand respect changed an entire system. Sometimes, late at night when her shift ended, Helen would sit in her car for a moment before starting the engine. She would think about all the people who had dismissed her over the years, all the times she had been invisible, and all the moments when she had chosen to respond with grace instead of anger. She had learned long ago that dignity couldn't be given or taken away by others. It lived inside you, steady and unshakable, waiting for the moment when you chose to stand up not just for yourself, but for everyone who had ever been made to feel small. In the end, Helen Brooks's story wasn't about revenge or vindication. It was about the quiet power of never losing sight of your own worth, and the ripple effect that occurs when one person refuses to be diminished. The lesson was simple but profound. Treat every person as if they matter, because they do. And sometimes, the person you underestimate might not just change your life, they might save your soul. As Helen drove home that night, past the dealership where her dignity had been restored, past the hospital where her service continued, she smiled. Not because she had won something, but because she had never lost the most important thing of all, herself. And in a world that too often judges by appearances, Helen Brooks remained a quiet reminder that true worth isn't measured by what you wear or drive, but by how you treat others when no one is watching, and how you respond when you're treated less than you deserve. The silver sedan glided through the quiet streets, carrying a woman who had learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to let the world make you smaller than you are. If you love the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share to people around you. See you in my next video.